I found the pink notice before I even shut the Jeep door. I'd just gotten back from flying emergency relief supplies into a wildfire zone, and there it was, parking violation for the crime of parking in my own driveway. Underneath it, in black marker, somebody had written, "Try reading the rules, soldier boy." I didn't need a detective. Karen always dotted her I's with little hearts. That was the moment I decided if Karen didn't want to see my Jeep in the driveway, fine. Next time I'd come home in something harder to ignore. 2 weeks earlier, I'd bought the Jeep olive green Wrangler tow winch, all-terrain tires, practical more than flashy. 3 days later, Karen marched up my driveway in a pastel pink tracksuit, clipboard in one hand, iced latte in the other. "This neighborhood has an aesthetic standard," she said, leaning into my window, "and that thing doesn't meet it." I laughed because I thought she had to be kidding. Big mistake. By dinner, I had an HOA email marked urgent compliance issue saying my vehicle was visually disruptive and should be moved off-site or hidden. I wrote back, "Does my driveway count as disruptive or just my service record?" The next morning, I got an envelope full of violations that felt invented overnight. No visible decals, no utility accessories, no vehicles above a certain height in public view. Once I started talking to neighbors, I realized I wasn't the only target. Karen had fined a retired firefighter over his pickup, told a veteran to repaint his American flag mailbox, and warned one family that their kid's sidewalk chalk was excessively bright. She didn't govern, she occupied. Most of my neighbors were decent people, but when her name came up, every face tightened. She hadn't really won power, so much as worn everybody down until nobody challenged her anymore. I tried to ignore her. I parked the Jeep deeper in the driveway, turned it around, kept my head down. Didn't matter. One night I got back late from a medevac drill and the driveway was empty. For a second I thought the Jeep had been stolen. Then I saw the pink towing slip on the concrete. "Emergency lane obstruction," it said. My own driveway, my own property. Towed while I was away on active duty training. That kind of thing can make you furious, but what hit me wasn't fury. It was clarity. I walked into my garage, opened the steel locker in the back, and pulled out the things I hadn't touched in a while: flight patches, certificates, my current license. And standing there in that half shadow, I smiled. If Karen didn't want the Jeep in the driveway, maybe she'd prefer I come in from above. I kept my mouth shut and started making yard improvements. I re-leveled part of the backyard under the excuse of building a meditation space. I had synthetic landing mats delivered in pieces. When Karen asked what I was doing, I told her yoga. Then I drove out to the regional airstrip and talked to my buddy Jeff, who handled maintenance for private aircraft. We went through zoning, FAA restrictions, flight paths, setback rules. Semi-rural area, properly permitted qualified pilot. Turns out it was completely possible. So I filed the paperwork. Private landing operations, medical responder background certifications, attached site diagrams included. I did it by the book. When the permit came through, I read it twice and set it on the kitchen table like it was a winning hand. Karen had spent weeks trying to trap me inside rules she barely understood. She never imagined I'd find a different rule book. By the time I got the Jeep back scraped, dinged, side mirror cracked, I wasn't even mad anymore. I documented everything, filmed the damage, and posted a calm video explaining that the HOA had towed my vehicle while I was serving and that I was considering alternate methods of arrival. The internet loved it. Somebody wrote, "If she hates parking, wait till she meets altitude." Still, the attention wasn't the point. The point was precision. The first real crack in Karen's armor came at the emergency HOA meeting she called to stop my possible aviation threats. She stood at the front of the room with blurry photos of my backyard talking about frightened children, traumatized pets, collapsing property values. Then Angela, a retired ER nurse who almost never spoke, stood up and said, "Let me understand this. The man flew. Medevac has permits, has training, and your concern is that his lawn is too professional." The room laughed, and not politely. I stood, held up the permit, and said, "Everything I've done is legal. If noise is the issue, we can discuss lawnmowers next." That was the shift. People stopped staring at the floor. A man asked if his son could watch the first landing. Karen kept talking, but nobody was really with her anymore. Her power had always depended on people feeling alone. The second they realized they weren't, she started shrinking. Then I called my old flight buddy Jason, who had access to a Bell 206. "You fueling it?" he asked, "or should I?" I fueled it. The morning of the first landing, the whole neighborhood had that weird buzz in the air. People wandered outside pretending to do normal things, but nobody was fooling anybody. Karen came out in giant sunglasses and stood on her porch trying to look in control. Then the rotor noise started, distant at first, that thump, thump, thump rolling over the rooftops. Heads turned. Phones came out. Jason brought the bell in slow and smooth, the machine hanging over my backyard for one beautiful second before settling onto the pad like it had always belonged there. The wind kicked the grass. Somebody laughed, a kid shouted, and when the skids touched down, a low cheer moved through the cul-de-sac like people had been waiting years to exhale. Jason shut her down. I opened the side door. He stepped out grinning. Nice spot. I looked across the street where Karen was frozen on her porch. Morning, Karen, I called. Hope the noise wasn't too unsightly. She turned around, went inside, and slammed the door. That should have been enough. But Karen didn't know how to lose quietly. She posted angry letters, tried inventing an airspace agreement, called the city, called code enforcement, called anybody who might validate her feelings. Then she tipped off a reporter and made me sound like some rogue pilot terrorizing suburbia. That was the twist she didn't see coming. Once cameras showed up, the truth got bigger than the neighborhood. The local story ran with my permit-supportive neighbors and Karen pacing on her porch like a woman trying to fight a thunderstorm with a clipboard. The whole thing turned on her. She still escalated. One Saturday morning, right before another landing, 2 patrol cars rolled up after Karen called in illegal aircraft threats. The officers were polite, just confused. I handed them the binder permits, logs, license, zoning approval. They reviewed it, made a couple calls, and one of them handed it back and said, "Sir, you're completely within your rights." A few days later, I woke up to motion sensor alerts at 2:17 in the morning. Night vision footage showed 2 figures creeping across the pad, one spraying paint while the other kept watch. I zoomed in, and there she was, pink hoodie, unmistakable posture. Karen. By sunrise, giant dripping red letters across my landing mat read, "No fly zone." I didn't yell. I documented it, called my lawyer, then called the police. This time there was no confusion. There was video trespassing, vandalism, and a long history of harassment. By the next HOA meeting, the whole neighborhood was boiling. Linda stood up before Karen could speak and said, "We're done. We vote now." That meeting felt like watching a dam break. Story after story came out, fines over bird feeders, complaints about chalk warnings over trash cans, even an email where Karen had ordered children not to laugh too loudly after 6. Half the board resigned that night. An emergency election was scheduled. Karen tried one last round of stunts before the vote cones near my pad, a fake barrier, a laughable cease and desist letter. My lawyer answered with a counterclaim that included harassment, defamation, and property damage backed by enough documentation to bury her. By the morning of the final vote, the neighborhood was quiet in that charged way. My Jeep sat in the driveway, freshly cleaned, exactly where it had always belonged. Inside the community hall, chairs filled up fast. Karen arrived in a beige suit like she was heading into court. When the vote of no confidence finally came up, Rick, the vice president she'd spent months sidelining, stood and read the motion in a voice so steady it almost felt ceremonial. She tried to object, started babbling about procedure, and Rick reminded her she'd dissolved the compliance committee herself 6 months earlier. That silence, man, it was beautiful. Ballots got handed out, counted twice. 87% in favor of removing her. Not close, not arguable. Done. The room erupted. People clapped, whistled, laughed, hugged. Karen just stood there like somebody had unplugged her. Then she walked out without a speech, without a threat, without the grand exit she probably thought she deserved. The next morning, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. She was gone within a week. After that, the neighborhood changed fast. The new board rolled back the petty rules, refunded bogus fines, and let people breathe again. We threw a neighborhood barbecue to celebrate. Jason flew in. Kids stared at the helicopter like it was magic. Somebody made a wooden plaque for my yard that read, "To the man who parked in the sky when the ground got petty." And standing there that evening, I realized the lesson wasn't really about revenge. It was about exposure. Bullies seem invincible right up until somebody calmly, legally, publicly refuses to bend. Most power isn't real power at all. It's borrowed silence, borrowed fear, borrowed obedience. Once people stop lending it, the whole thing collapses. I never wanted to be some symbol. I just wanted to park my Jeep in peace. But maybe that's how these things always start. Not with some giant crusade, just one ordinary person getting pushed 1 inch too far and deciding very quietly not anymore. And I'll tell you this, watching Karen drive out of that neighborhood for the last time while my Jeep sat untouched in the driveway and a helicopter pad gleamed in the backyard. Yeah, that felt pretty close to justice. So, here's the question. When somebody abuses a little power for a long enough time, is beating them with the law and a little humiliation fair game? Or does that make you just as petty as they are? Tell me what you think. Who was right? Who went too far? And whether you've ever had to deal with somebody who mistook control for authority.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.